Well, the gang is back together for another week of the NFC West Huddle. I'm joined by Megan Plain in Phoenix, Keyshawn Ward in San Francisco, and Ryan Dyrud in Los Angeles. The Seahawks obviously got a head start on the preseason with Game 1 last night against Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders. Lots of takeaways there, but the rest of you cover teams who play on Saturday. So I want to know from each of you to start things off, what's the biggest headline from this week heading into preseason game number 1? Ryan, let's start with you and the LA Rams.
Well, as everyone knows, the Rams do not ever play any starters. Usually they don't even play their backups sometimes if they're a high-priority backup. So probably no Jimmy Garoppolo playing. But I think the big storyline is still kind of how these little injuries have started to stack up. It's been well documented. Matthew Stafford with his aggravated discs now and seeing a spine specialist. Just yesterday, though, Sean McVay told us that he is going to be doing a workout tomorrow pregame, and if it goes well, he'll actually be back at practice on Monday. So I think a lot of Rams fans can finally breathe a sigh of relief if that does go well. But yesterday, Jared Verse was banged up, so he's now week to week, as McVay likes to say. Poona Ford, week to week. Manuel Forbes, week to week. Nate Landman, week to week. So none of these starters would play in the preseason, but a lot of them being week to week in training camp is not ideal, as we are now just 2 weeks away or so from the regular season. But big storyline, Matthew Stafford potentially finally seeing the field next week. So we'll keep you posted on that.
All right, thank you for that update, because that is something that we've been talking about here in Seattle. The Rams, obviously, in a lot of different Vegas betting odds, are the favorite to win the NFC West. All right, Keyshawn, I know the 49ers had joint practices this week. How did they go?
It went pretty well. There was a couple of injury scares. Our first-round pick, Michael Wins, hyperextended his knee, so didn't really get to see a lot of him after that. But I believe that the Niners did pretty well at the end of the practice because, like we mentioned before the show started, the Broncos, they won the first half, but Brock Purdy said they turned things up when they kind of got into rhythm, and that was well on scene because Ricky Pearsall was torching the defense a lot throughout that joint practice. But what we could look for in this first preseason game is the talk of the whole training camp. The defensive rookies on our Niners defense. Who's going to stand out? All of them made plays throughout camp. So, for example, the nickel corner, Upton Stout, out of Western Kentucky, he's been making a lot of noise. Even the future Hall of Famer, Richard Sherman, said it himself. He said he's probably the one that's probably making the most out of his opportunity right now that's going on in camp because he's just standing out. But I want to know who's going to make the great first impression to Robert Saleh to show who should be a starter on the 49ers defense.
Ooh, okay. I can't wait to see. And Megan, what stood out for the Cardinals this week before they face Kansas City Saturday?
Yeah, I'd say just where they are with the corner position, because that was an area early on in camp that saw some injuries. But, they've had guys step up. Will Johnson, the young guy that they drafted this season, he's really been impressing. He's got the older guys on the team, the veterans, talking about how he already looks like a guy who's going to play many years in the NFL. So to already see some guys step up in a position of need due to injuries has been cool to watch. Then, of course, the offensive line, I know it's not the super exciting position, right? But they brought in Will Johnson. He, of course, had an injury last season. They decided to re-sign him on a one-year deal. So that was a big deal this week because it adds some depth to that offensive line. Of course, as you all know, as the season goes on, right, you're going to need depth at that position. So for them to have that there, depth on that side of the ball on the offensive line, they've already got a good thing going on the defensive line with all that they've done in the offseason. So it's just guys stepping up, guys that are being brought in. They're helping to kind of shore up some of that depth that they really needed.
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to offensive line moves, no one gets more excited than Seahawks fans. I totally understand that. When it comes to the Seahawks, you guys, I don't know a more exciting headline than a preseason game ending in a tie, right? Former Hawks head coach Pete Carroll had a warm welcome back at Lumen Field as the new head coach of the Raiders. He was having fun with fans, with Blitz, the Seahawks mascot, throwing bubble gum, literally throwing bubble gum into the crowd. But after a really solid first half by Seattle and a 16-3 lead, Pete manufactured one of those classic comebacks, outscoring the Hawks 20-7 in those final 2 quarters. Seattle had to block a field goal to preserve the 23-all tie by the end of it. Mike McDonald played 3, maybe 4 of his starters on the offensive line, including first-round pick Gray Zabel. They looked good, and honestly, for the first 2 drives, they were facing most of the Raiders' defensive starters, so it was good to see them push. They made some push and movement and holes for the offense and the run game. They were efficient enough, I think, in the run game to show that offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak and his coaching staff is making a difference. He called the game like we predicted, much more balanced than last year. Remember, last year they passed the ball at the 5th highest rate in the league with Ryan Grubb and Geno Smith at quarterback. And then rookie receiver, who we'll talk about in a bit, Torrey Horton, really stood out. More on that a little bit later. As we move on, who do you think each of your fan bases wants to be talking about after the first preseason game? And for a good reason. Unless you have a bad one, throw it out there. Keyshawn, let's start with you and the 49ers on this one.
Yeah, so originally I was going to say Michael wins, but like I just mentioned, he hyperextended his knee, so I highly doubt he's going to start or play more than one series. So the other rookie that Niner fans probably want to talk good about is probably the wide receiver Jordan Watkins, because Watkins brings a different element to this offense. The Niners wide receiver room, they have a lot of possession receivers, but Watkins has that 4.3 speed, could really kind of take the top of a defense. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does against the Broncos in this preseason game. And also, I just think that that's probably the one position that has the most in-depth competition, because the 1 and 2 is already secured. With Brandon Ayuk being out probably till week 10 or longer, I think the Niners really want to see who's going to establish himself as that third receiver. So it's going to be interesting to see what Watkins does against the Broncos on Saturday.
No doubt. All right, Megan, who would Cardinals fans most want to see go out and have a day in Game 1?
I think this is probably a pretty easy answer here. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, last season there were high expectations for him going into the year. He didn't live up to the expectations that people had set, and it was really interesting here in training camp when he even got vulnerable and mentions that those were weighing on him. All the chatter about how good he is supposed to be as that team's first-round pick was something that was kind of hard to tune out, and you really don't hear guys admit things like that very often, right? Yeah. But he has bulked up immensely this season. He looks like a completely different dude out there. It's unreal. He's been making huge plays all throughout camp, just putting on a show out there. So to now translate that into the first preseason game environment would be something that I think a lot of fans are dying to see, because they hope that he makes that year 2 step here with his connection with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, man, that name has been scaring, I think, the rest of the NFC West since he was drafted. And I really cannot wait to see what kind of year he has this season. Okay, Ryan, what about in Los Angeles? Who do you think Rams fans want to see have a good game?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 quick ones on the offense, and start with rookie running back drafted in the 4th round out of Auburn, Jarquez Hunter, has had a phenomenal training camp so far. When they drafted him, Sean McVay talked about his explosiveness in college, obviously averaged a high clip per run, but also his pass protection was something that was highly sought after. And in this McVay offense, in order for a running back to be on the field, they have to be good in pass protection. That's why last year, Blake Corum, the 3rd round pick out of Michigan, really wasn't able to crack into the rotation, and Kyron Williams had like 90% of the snaps just because Corum wasn't quite up to speed in the pass protection game. Jarquez Hunter has been fantastic in camp in one-on-one drills against linebackers. He has probably been the best running back in terms of blocking. And then, as I mentioned, the explosiveness. So it'll be fun to watch him against other competition, what that looks like in this personnel groupings, in this different play calling. Obviously, it's going to be a really vanilla play calling game. But the coaches have all talked about him. Offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur have talked about, he almost gets like mad dogged at him if he doesn't give him the football. The dude just always wants the football. So it'll be fun to see. LaFleur is actually going to call this game. McVay lets his assistants call preseason games. So that'll be fun to see how involved Hunter is. And then lastly, I'll just be quick, but Stetson Bennett, he's going to get talked about, whether it's good, whether it's bad. He's going to get the both of the snaps this game. Like I said, Jimmy Garoppolo probably will not play at all. And so they really need to see if this guy is the backup of the future. I think it's a foregone conclusion. He's not the future quarterback after Stafford, but is he going to stick around long enough to be the backup after Jimmy Garoppolo? So a lot to prove for Stetson Bennett, and certainly he'll get talked about, as he always does.
Yeah, and important to know that. Honestly, a reminder that Stetson Bennett is with the Rams in case anything goes wrong with Jimmy Garoppolo, in addition to Matthew Stafford. Good thing to remember. Okay, the main reason I asked this question is because I think the player that many wanted to see shine Thursday for the Seahawks against the Raiders absolutely did. Torrey Horton was a 5th-round draft pick, but he's been taking first-team offense reps away from Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who the Seahawks acquired this offseason as a veteran wide receiver and that number 3 sort of option, a guy who can take the top off of defense, because you really didn't replace DK Metcalf. Against Las Vegas, Horton had 3 catches on 7 targets. I thought that was important, the fact that he was targeted 7 times for 31 yards, but his touchdown pass that he got from Drew Lock showed a glimpse of something special. He caught it 5 yards away from the end zone, slithered, I mean literally like snuck in between. It looked so smooth between 3 Raiders defenders at the 5-yard line to get into the end zone. He also flashed on a punt return, and you guys, he only moved about 5 yards, which doesn't sound exciting or like a highlight, but what he did to even get 5 yards, you know how hard it is to earn a single yard in the NFL. He did a nice spin move. He just looks like an athlete, and he looks comfortable already. And this is a guy coming off a season-ending leg injury just last October, a few months ago, cutting his time at Colorado State short. But he received a few top 50 grades from draft analysts before that injury. He showed why last night. He's fun to watch. He's exactly what the Seahawks need to try and replace a guy like DK Metcalf. And he comes off super humble. I've got a quote about him that we'll talk about later on in the show. Okay, full disclosure, I know we talk position groups ad nauseum during the preseason. We're probably all sick of it by now. But I'm wondering which position group could change the most for each of your teams after 3 preseason games. Obviously, I'm mostly curious about those 2nd and 3rd stringers here, unless there is a starting job up for grabs. Megan, let's start with you and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see who they keep around in the secondary. I had mentioned that addition of Will Hernandez on the offensive line. They released someone in the secondary to make room there, so they do have some young guys there who are vying for spots. Obviously, you have your key starters like a Budda Baker, a Will Johnson, who they drafted, who's already, making big strides here in training camp. So I think we could see some shifting going on there for sure. Just on the defensive side of the ball in general, this is the side this year where they've really made a lot of changes going into training camp. They drafted a lot of guys there, signed a lot of guys there. So, on the offensive side, things are pretty, cut and dry as to where they stand. They're pretty consistent with what we saw last season and the carryover into this year. So I think just the defensive side of the ball in general, they have a lot of guys there who are fighting for spots, not a lot of open spots, right? They have a lot of key guys in those starting positions. So it's just a matter of who they decide to kind of cut there to trim the fat a little bit.
And Ryan, with Los Angeles, which position group do you think could be shaken up the most after these 3 preseason games? I know you talk about how Sean McVay doesn't love to play a lot of starters, so what could change the most?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about the secondary, but I'll change it up a little bit because I think there's 2 groups, and I think the offensive line is one that can certainly look different because there's this unknown with their starting left tackle. Eric Jackson is still dealing with blood clots, and for those that, don't know kind of what that entails, he's on blood thinners to deal with that, and so any sort of contact can be actually life-threatening. Wow. So he's been out there for some individual drills. He's been at practice and camp every single day, but still not taking any contact. So as of now, they brought in a vet. They know him well in Arizona, so he'll be out there as the starter, not obviously tomorrow's in tomorrow's game, but he'll be out there for the season opener most likely as a starter. But then who do they keep behind that? Because they're going to have this heavy rotation potentially. Kevin Dotson has gotten a little banged up, their starting guard, and so Justin Dedich has been filling in he was a walk-on last year, and now he's been playing some starting reps, and he played some starting center reps last year. So I think it's going to be a lot of guys rotationally that they could keep, and I expect that room to keep 10 guys total, which is a lot for one position group. But when you have so much unknown between 2 to 3 starters, and we saw last year at the end of the year, the offensive line was basically a turnstile with all the injuries, and they went through tons of different guys, hence why a guy like Justin Dedich as an undrafted free agent was starting in week 3. So I think they'll rotate a lot of guys, and that's a position group I think that we really know how it looks until probably the Thursday before week 1.
Yeah, you guys go ahead and keep as many offensive linemen on the roster as you need. That was rough last year. I remember it. I'm sure the rest of us do too. Keyshawn, yeah. I'm going to sneak in front of you here and talk Seahawks quickly, because outside of that crucial battle for wide receiver number 3, another one is outside linebacker. Boye Mafe and Derek Hall are listed as 1 and 2 with an or option in between, a coach's favorite thing to do to make sure they don't give away a secret. That's a position Uchenna Nwosu normally starts in when healthy. Well, he's not healthy yet after offseason surgery. So those two will be duking it out the rest of the preseason, and we'll be kind of watching to see when Uchenna Nwosu can insert himself back into that starting role. Derek Hall has started more than one small skirmish in practice, so he's actually been a really fun player to keep your eyes on because everything he does is violent. And how does that play into the regular season? He had a career-high year last year in terms of quarterback hits and sacks. He's fiery. I want to see if that turns into a presence that you just can't take off the field. And you also have a guy that's dealing with an injury in Tyrese Knight. He is an important starting linebacker, I think in his third year, heading into his third year. And we didn't get an update on the injury. He said, Mike McDonald has said that he needed imaging on his knee, and we did not get an update on that imaging last night. He said we'll know more tomorrow. So at some point Friday, some point Saturday, we'll find out more. So that will be interesting. Okay, Keyshawn, what about position groups in San Francisco? What can be shaken up the most with preseason games?
Well, right now, the safety position, because it already looks different coming into the preseason because Tyler Nwafunga's in Denver and Malik Mustafa's recovering from a torn ACL. So right now, it's pretty much a four-way battle between Jason Pinnock, Jair Brown, Marcus Siegel, and Richie Grant. And all of these guys bring different elements to this defense. Jair Brown's, in year 3 with the Niners. Pinnock is probably the most season in this defense because he played on Robert Saleh in the New York Jets uniform his rookie year 2 years ago. And then Richie Grant is a veteran who could play inside the box in the middle of the field. And Marcus Siegel is a rookie who has such raw ability and has speed that can really help on the back end. So it's interesting to see who's going to kind of rise to the top in that position battle for the safety positions.
Ooh, okay, so secondary on a lot of your minds, I can tell. For some of you, secondary, not a problem with the Seahawks. They are loaded, and I know, Megan, it sounds like Arizona is loaded up there too. Okay, so one other topic that we have to talk about. I love knowing what kind of quotes are being said between coaches, players, assistant coaches, equipment staff, whatever you guys have been hearing. I want to know some of the funniest quotes, some of the most maybe insightful quotes that help us, up here in Seattle or in all these other markets, learn about a certain player. Anything stand out specifically? Ryan, I'm going to put the pressure on you first. Anything stand out with Rams and the quotes?
Oh, yeah, a lot of pressure here to go first. But, no, got to go with Kyren Williams. Just signed, a 3-year extension, $33 million, 11 per year, $23 million guaranteed. So he's always been a player, a fan favorite that, has just embraced L.A. and embraced the Rams culture since being here. I always love being able to talk to him anyway, and he's a guy that, will do anything. Basically, thing he always says is, hey, whatever McVay wants me to do, I'll do. Like, run the ball, pass pro, catch the ball. I'm here to just play football and do what the coach asked me to do. But after his extension, we all got to talk to him, and a couple quotes. One was, almost like a proposal. He just said, I can't believe they said yes. And essentially, through the off season, his agents, Drew Rosenhaus, there were murmurs that they were going to be asking for that 14, 15 million per, which would have put him in the top 3 with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. None of us really believed that would happen, but apparently he kind of went to the Rams with this 11-ish million, and they said yes, and they signed the deal, and he was thrilled with it, obviously, and he's happy to be a Ram for at least 3 more years. And the other one along those lines is he's really close with his mom, and came out and said, now my mama can retire. She's never got to work again. So always awesome when you hear those stories and these players that when they do hit their paydays, because, as fans, a lot of times we see these numbers and these millions of dollars that are so astronomical compared to what a lot of working people make. But seeing that they can do other things with it and support a lot in their family and, give back to those that have helped them get to where they are is always so cool to see. So he was thrilled. Rams fans are thrilled, and the organization obviously happy to have him locked up and no more questions about his contract. That'll be the favorite quote, I think, is not having to answer anything anymore.
I'm sure he's over it. I mean, you see the players' faces whenever they have to answer questions about contract stuff. They just really love it. Sarcasm there. And also, I think we all just became big fans of him for that mama quote. Go retire. Go enjoy your free time. Your son's going to work hard for you. Okay, Keyshawn, over in San Francisco, what quotes stand out to you in the training camp session?
So far, I would have to say when Robert Saleh called his rookie defensive tackle, C.J. West, a little fire hydrant. When you first initially hear, it's kind of like, is that a compliment or is that a good thing or bad thing? And when C.J. West responded to when he heard it after the podium, he was kind of like, I'll run with it. You know, my DC gave me a nickname. I'll take it. Because I think he called him because he's 6'1" at 315 pounds. He's real short in stature for his position, but it's a compliment because Saul was trying to say he's so powerful you can't move him. So it's like, I'll take it, but that's probably the one that stood out the most to me throughout training camp so far.
Yeah, I think a fun challenge for us as a group, just go tell your friends that they remind you of a fire hydrant and see how they take it. I'm sure all of them will view it as a compliment. Megan, what about up in Arizona with the Cardinals? Any quotes stand out to you so far?
I would say all of the conversations surrounding Calais Campbell. You know, he's been in the league a long time, right? 18th season, not a big deal. He started with the Cardinals. He's back, which is really exciting for the fan base. But when you look at the way the players talk about him, there's obviously a lot of respect, don't get me wrong. But a lot of guys love to bring up his age and just how old he is. They love to point out they were just in elementary school, you know, when they were watching him in the league, making conversations like that. But of course, on the respect side of things, it's not just guys in his position group on his side of the ball that go to him for, you know, different advice and how to last in the league as long as he has. It's guys on the other side of the ball too. I mean, Zay Jones, a wide receiver, is going to Calais Campbell, a defensive end, and, you know, asking him to tell him everything that he needs to know if he wants to last in the league. So everybody on the roster has so much respect for him. Monty Ossenford, the GM, made sure to mention, like, hey, yeah, the guy's been around a long time. He needs his veteran days, right? Yeah. But he's here because the guy can still play really good football. So it's a nice give and take all throughout camp that we've seen from guys roasting Calais for being pretty old compared to the rest of the roster, and then guys also talking about just the wealth of knowledge that he brings to the locker room.
Okay, for clarification, how many years in the league did you say he has?
18. It's a long time.
18. That is incredible. I mean, you're like approaching Tom Brady status at that point. That's two different generations.
Right?
That's just not, that's not one generation separation. That is almost two. That's a good one. Okay, for me, there are two things that stand out. One that we mentioned before even coming on this show, it happened last night. And Marshawn Lynch, I'm sure anyone who was watching any preseason action on Twitter, you know, credentialed photographer now. Expect the unexpected when it comes to Marshawn Lynch. Whoever knows what he's doing in a bright blue sweatsuit on the sideline, especially as George Halani is running in for his touchdown. He makes it over the pylon, does a little barrel roll, and actually runs into Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch gives him one of these, like a stiff arm. And initially, I thought he was just trying to slow him down. Later on, I see the replay. He's trying to protect his camera out there. Like he's a photog now, so he's got to protect this valuable asset. I asked George Halani about it in the locker room. He's like, oh, I was like, did you expect to see Marshawn Lynch, you know, and as a guy you're running toward? And he was like, I have no idea what to expect from Marshawn Lynch ever. And then he also called that little stiff arm a love tap. That's what he considered it. He's like, oh, yeah, just a little love tap. And I was like, in my head, I was like, go look at it later. You're not going to think the same after that. But the other quote, and Keyshawn, I'm actually curious to hear your reaction on this one. Torrey Horton, when you get a chance to see him, Torrey Horton was speaking at a press conference for the first time. He's a rookie. He's a fifth-round draft pick. Came in very humble. But one player, Reek Wolin, came by and actually interrupted the press conference. And I want to know what you think of this. He said, Jerry Rice Jr. right there. Jerry Rice Jr. That's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie wide receiver from a cornerback. And I was like, yes, Jerry Rice is famous for being a Seahawk, a.k.a. not really. But as a 49er, what do you think of that?
That's a bit much, but I would say Torrey Horton, I've been watching him since he was at Colorado State, always makes the first guy miss. You just mentioned it earlier in this preseason game. Man, on that punt return, it was something so minor, but he made two guys fall on their face after one move. So, hey, it's an early start, but I respect Reek Wolin for saying that. But it's a little bit too early just to say it, but I respect it.
Yeah, I'm feeling for Torrey Horton. Ryan, I'm curious, any thoughts on that, too, since I know you've covered NFL for a while. Jerry Rice Jr., some lofty expectations.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Rice was a late-round draft pick, smaller school, so the measurables kind of match up. Love that. But his former coach at Colorado State, Chad Savage, is now the tight end inside receiver coach at USC. So I've actually talked to Chad quite a few times about Torrey, and he just can't say anything but big things. Basically said if he didn't have the injury history, he would have been a first or second round pick. So Seattle got a good one. I mean, that dude is going to be special if he can stay on the field.
And what came out was like the humility. He was like, completely dismissive of that. He's like, nah, man. He's also been called the steal of the draft from another Seahawks rookie, Nick Emenwari. Megan, I'm curious, out of just general curiosity, has anyone tried to compare Marvin Harrison Jr. to anyone? I know obviously his dad played, right? But in terms of the wide receiver talent he has?
Yeah, I think, of course, in season 1, people were making comparisons, and everyone wanted to compare him to Larry Fitzgerald, right? Someone who also played with the Arizona Cardinals. And when you did look at each of their first seasons, it's actually not wildly different. So, you would hope that bodes well for Marvin Harrison Jr. and what he's going to end up going on to do here in Arizona. But I think this season, it's kind of all comparisons aside, after he didn't quite live up to expectations that a lot of people around the league had last season. This year, it's just all about, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr. this year compared to when he came in as a rookie last year. And it's just the comparisons of how much he's bulked up, really, and just, what a force to be reckoned with he is out there so far from what we've seen in training camp.
Yeah, and again, expecting him to be a force to be reckoned with the rest of the way. Okay, that will do it for us here on the NFC West Huddle for this week. Can't wait to catch up with all of you on preseason game number 1. For most of you, that happens on Saturday. The Seahawks have their second preseason game on Friday, August 15th, against the Kansas City Chiefs. Thanks to each of you, and thanks for always bringing the wisdom and the honesty. We'll see you next week.